I never thought moving into a quiet, picture-perfect neighborhood would lead to blood on the pavement. But that's exactly what happened when the HOA decided to push us too far. It started with petty warnings, then threats, and before I knew it, my wife was on the ground, punched by the very people who claimed to keep our community safe. What they didn't realize was who they were messing with. Because when you lay a hand on a veteran's wife, you ignite a storm you can't control. How did a simple HOA rule spiral into a full-blown brawl that changed everything? Stay tuned. When we first moved into this neighborhood, it felt like the American dream. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and neighbors who smiled as they waved. It was everything we'd hoped for after years of saving and sacrificing. My wife was thrilled to finally have a home with a backyard where she could plant her garden, and I was just happy to be in a place where life felt calm and predictable. The HOA. At first they seemed harmless, just a group of people making sure everything looked nice. They sent out newsletters about community events, talked about maintaining neighborhood standards, and even dropped off welcome baskets. It almost felt too good to be true, and maybe that's because it was. Behind the friendly smiles and polite small talk, there were rules. Rules about everything: the color of your shutters, how high your grass could grow, even what kind of car you could park in your own driveway. We thought it was just part of the deal, nothing serious. But then the letters started coming. First, it was a friendly reminder about the height of our hedges. Then a notice about the small American flag my wife had placed near the front. Steps. Apparently, it didn't meet community guidelines. It felt petty, but we didn't think much of it. What we didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. The HOA wasn't just about keeping things neat. It was about control. And the people running it? They weren't the type to back down when challenged. At first, the warnings seemed harmless, almost laughable. A letter in the mailbox here. A little note taped to the door there. Please trim your hedges to regulation height. Your garden? Decor exceeds approved guidelines. My wife and I rolled our eyes and handled it. We didn't want trouble. After all, this was our home, the place we thought we'd grow old together. But then the tone shifted. What started as friendly reminders turned into official notices, and soon the envelopes came marked in bold red letters. Violation. They weren't just asking anymore. They were demanding. The first fine was $50 for the so-called unapproved American flag my wife had placed by the front steps. A tiny flag, no bigger than a sheet of paper. We paid it, thinking it would end there. But within a week, another fine came, this time for the shade of our mailbox. Apparently it wasn't community beige. That's when I started to realize this wasn't about rules. It was about control, and it didn't stop. One after another, the violations piled up. Grass half an inch too tall, a flower pot that clashed with neighborhood aesthetics, even the wreath on our front door during Christmas. Every letter sounded more threatening than the last, hinting at legal action if we didn't comply. My wife tried to stay positive, but I could see the stress wearing on her. She loved this house, loved this community. She wanted to believe we could just talk it out, find some middle ground. But the more we tried to reason with them, the worse it got. The HOA board members weren't just enforcing rules, they were enjoying the power. Every meeting we attended felt like a courtroom, with them sitting smugly behind a long table, quoting bylaws like scripture. And no matter what we said, no matter how reasonable we tried to be, it was always the same. Rules are rules. Then came the threat that changed everything. A lien on our home. They claimed we owed over $2,000 in accumulated fines. $2,000 for things as petty as mailbox paint and decorative flowers. If we didn't pay, they said, they could put a lien on the property and even force foreclosure. That's when the frustration turned to rage. I served my country for 20 years. I faced things most people couldn't imagine. And now, after everything, I was being bullied out of my own home by a group of people who never lifted a finger for anyone but themselves. We decided to fight. I started digging through the HOA bylaws, reading every page like it was a mission briefing. And what I found was shocking. Half the things they were fining us for weren't even in the official rules. They were made up, arbitrary decisions, by the board to preserve neighborhood image. I gathered evidence, documented everything. Photos of the letters, timestamps, notes from meetings. I wasn't going to let this slide, but the more I pushed back, the nastier they got. One night, as my wife was coming home from work, she found 2 HOA enforcers, yes, enforcers, that's what they called themselves, standing in our yard, with clipboards, taking pictures of our home. She asked what they were doing, and one of them smirked and said, "Just making sure you're following the rules." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just harassment. It was intimidation. They wanted us scared. They wanted us to bend. We didn't, and that's when things turned violent. It was a Saturday afternoon when I heard my wife scream. I ran outside and saw one of the HOA enforcers grabbing her arm, trying to yank the flagpole out of the ground. She struggled, and when she pushed him back, he punched her. Right there, in our own yard. I froze for a split second. Then something in me snapped. Time slowed the moment I saw that fist hit my wife. Her head snapped back, and she stumbled into the flower bed she'd spent weeks perfecting. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. Then instinct, raw, unfiltered, and unstoppable, took over. I was across the yard in seconds, the sound of my boots pounding against the pavement louder than my heartbeat. The enforcer turned, but before he could say a word, I hit him, hard. Years of training surged through me like muscle memory. He dropped to the ground, gasping for air, clutching his ribs. The other one lunged at me, swinging wildly. Wrong move. Ducked. Drove my shoulder into his midsection and slammed him into the ground so hard, the breath left his lungs in a single gasp. He groaned, trying to crawl away, but I wasn't done. Not yet. I looked at my wife, shaken, bruised, tears streaking her face, and something inside me snapped all over again. Neighbors started gathering. Phones came out. People were recording. And honestly, good. Let them. Let the world see what this HOA really was. A gang of bullies drunk on power, thinking they could get away with anything. Sirens wailed in the distance, but I didn't care. At that moment, nothing existed except the 2 men who thought they could terrorize my family. I stood over them, towering, breathing hard, every muscle tight like a coiled spring. "You picked the wrong damn house," I said, my voice low but shaking with rage. The cops showed up minutes later. They took statements, cuffed the enforcers, and led them away like the criminals they were. And as they drove off, I realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because now it was war, and I wasn't about to lose. The cops hauling those 2 men away should have been the end of it. But with HOAs, nothing is ever that simple. In fact, that night, after everything, we got an email from the board. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold, sterile message that read, "Due to repeated violations and hostile behavior, the board will be pursuing legal action against your household." I laughed when I read it. I laughed so hard my chest hurt. Legal action? Against us? After their people assaulted my wife? They had some nerve. But it wasn't funny for long. Because 2 days later, a formal letter arrived. The HOA was trying to fine us $15,000 for damages, aggression, and community disruption. They even threatened foreclosure if we didn't pay. That's when I knew. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was a war, and they were willing to burn the entire neighborhood down to win. So I did what I do best. I prepared for battle. I hired an attorney. Not just any attorney, but one who specialized in HOA abuse cases. When I told him what happened, he actually laughed and said, "They don't know what's coming." And he was right, because while they were busy writing up fake fines, I was gathering evidence. Every letter, every voicemail, Every photo of those enforcers trespassing on my property. And then, the smoking gun. Video footage from my security camera. It captured everything. The enforcer grabbing my wife, the punch, the entire attack. High definition, audio included. When my lawyer saw that, his smile was ice cold. "We're not just fighting back," he said. "We're going to bury them." The lawsuit hit them like a freight train. Assault, trespassing, harassment, defamation, and emotional distress. My attorney went for every angle. And because I'm a veteran, we added an extra layer. Hate crime considerations for targeting a military family. The news picked it up. Headlines read, HOA board under fire after violent attack on veteran's wife. Reporters started camping outside the neighborhood. Suddenly, those smug board members who thought they were untouchable were hiding in their homes, refusing to speak to anyone. The community turned against them. Neighbors who once sided with the board now whispered apologies at the mailbox. Some even joined our fight, handing over emails and text messages that proved what we already knew. This wasn't about rules. It was about control, and the board had been abusing it for years. Months later, we walked into court. The HOA came armed with their fancy lawyers and thick binders, acting like this was just a misunderstanding. But the moment my lawyer played that video for the jury, it was game over. The sound of that punch echoed in the courtroom. My wife's cry cut through the silence like a knife. And the look on the jury's faces? Pure disgust. The verdict? In our favor. On every single count. The HOA had to pay us $250,000 in damages. Those enforcers? Both convicted of assault and battery. One got jail time, the other probation. And the board? Dissolved. Completely. The HOA was dismantled, its power stripped away forever. As for us, we kept our home. And we made sure the world knew what happened. That story spread far beyond our little neighborhood. It became a warning, a reminder that bullies, no matter how polished or powerful they seem, will always fall when they go too far. People still ask me if it was worth it. The stress, the sleepless nights, the court battles, and every time I give the same answer. Yes. Because no one, no HOA, no neighbor, no self-appointed enforcer has the right to threaten a family, let alone lay a hand on someone I love. And maybe that's the takeaway for anyone watching this. Know your rights. Stand your ground. Because the moment you let someone take your freedom, your home, your peace, they'll never stop. We learned that the hard way. But in the end, we won. And they learned something too. Never underestimate a veteran protecting his family.